the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, automation, and programming aspects of the audiovisual industry. I'm your host, Steve Greenblatt. Thank you for joining us. We have another great show on tap today, and the episode for today will be IoT, otherwise known as the Internet of Things, and its impact on the AV industry and especially control systems and programming. With me to discuss this exciting topic are a number of informative guests, and I'll start by introducing our favorite uncle, Uncle Richie, Rich Fergoza from Fergoza Design. How are you today, Rich?
Good, mellow West Coast holiday greetings. Having a good time. It's a beautiful, it's not supposed to be fall here, but it's like 75 degrees, so digging it. And,
you get fall?
Sort of. Yeah, we've already started. I guess we have to. We have all the Halloween decorations out. So
there you go.
That's the first sign for us.
Excellent. And some baseball playoffs, at least for the most part.
Absolutely. Go Giants. Right.
And we have another Richard, who is a past guest, and we welcome him back. His name is Richard Blackwell from Link2 Software. How are you, Richard? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, we're well. Thank you again. I always enjoy spending time with you guys, or you dudes.
Well, we enjoy having you. And lastly, a friend and colleague who I've known for many years and who first got me into AMX, and I will be grateful for that. His name is Mike Carter from the Clarion Group. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. Think this is an interesting topic, and let's see what we can talk about.
Excellent. I will hop into the Infocom IoT Insights shortly, and that's something that Mike and Richard both were a part of. But first, I'm going to kick it off with Uncle Richie. Give me a little bit of just free-form feedback when you hear the word IoT, and what does that mean to us?
I've been thinking about it a lot, and obviously we just came back from CEDIA, and it's one of the interesting things again where a lot of times if we looked 20 years ago, I said before, we would see kind of the corporate and the commercial technology would trickle down into residential, and we've seen that shift with the advent of mobile and smart devices and tablets, where there's a lot of pressure from the residential side pushing up into commercial. And IoT right now, it's the Star Trek world. And really what's happening is we're starting to head into that really weird gray area, that Wild West area of all of the movies that we grew up with as kids, where the technology just kind of worked and was intelligent and just kind of answered every one of your commands. We're starting to see the beginning touches of that. Obviously, Alexa was a huge announcement at CEDIA this year, and them entering into the marketplace. The marketing push. Google just released their version, Google Home, I think, is what it's called. And so what we're seeing is IoT for us right now is about creating that intelligent home, bringing all of the parts together to create that intelligent and hopefully someday intuitive home. And what's happening right now is that we've got a lot of marketing push, and our collective group right here, we're the ones who right now are trying to pick up the pieces and saying, okay, great, there's all these wonderful devices out there. How are we going to make it work? And that's been the interesting part for IoT. IoT for me is a big puzzle. It's an opportunity, but it's the Wild West. Every time I think of IoT, I'm like, it's a great slogan right now. Now it's a matter of how the heck are we going to do it?
So, Mike, Rich talks about IoT as it relates to residential, and I know that your background is a lot in commercial with a little bit of residential. Where does IoT stand on the commercial side, and how have you seen that impact the way we do business?
So the interesting thing is, Rich mentioned, how do we control all this and how do we make it all work? Really, and coming from the commercial side, it's even more so this way. But the concept of IoT is really about sensors and about collecting data. It really isn't about control. It's about collecting the data of all the different systems and pieces, taking that data and doing something with it and affecting control of other systems based on that data. So in the commercial world, it's all about, occupancy sensing and managing spaces and managing, technologies within those spaces. And so from a control perspective, from an AV perspective, AV is one component of a much larger enterprise. And that's one of the things that I see, trickling, that if you want to trickle into the residential, really IoT is pushing the other direction, as Rich mentioned. So IoT is becoming a driver in the residential world. In the commercial world, it's pushing across from the IT side. So IT is doing it. Facilities management is doing IoT for sensors and whatnot in the space. And now it's a matter of how do we, as an AV community, how do we leverage that? How do we take advantage of that?
And Richard, I know that your business is a lot focused on IoT, and to Mike's point, how do we take advantage of IoT, and how have you seen, what opportunities have you seen, and how has that impacted your strategy?
So my perspective has always been from the commercial side. While I did automate my house and it's loaded full of IoT, what I see every day, the best example of that is a project we're doing right now in Iowa, University of Iowa, new children's hospital there. And in that hospital, every room has a sensor. Every light is automated. Every thermostat is automated. Every door, every shade, you name it. Every component of that hospital is either monitored or automated. And that creates a much more difficult environment. The density of automation is what in the past we would call perhaps an extreme, but today it's not. We're seeing that is becoming more and more, especially with the changes in local business requirements for new buildings and all the LEED certifications. So how that is affecting us, our focus is IoT, and it affects us in that we're swamped. That's a great thing to consider in an economy that's not so good right now. But when you think about all the things that are going on now, what's the downside of that? One is that the integrators are having to learn how to install gear and connect it. In the past, they perhaps installed that same gear, but it wasn't connected to anything. Today it is. The next part of it is who's using the data. So there's still a lot of a Wild West type scenario out there where everybody wants it. There's a big long list of pieces that people want. They're still struggling to understand how they're going to connect it all together. And I had a meeting just a couple of days ago where I asked some questions of data that was being collected, and no one knew what it was for. Now, it's important data. I know what it's for. I know how it's going to be used in the future. But when we look at that group, they all scratched their head and said, well, do I own that? Who owns this data? So it's a crazy world out there. I think we probably have another year or two of this before it starts to settle down.
So in terms, when you say settle down, are you saying that when there's best practices established, or how, or the kind of the norm in terms of dealing with IoT, or what specifically are you referring to there?
If I had to prioritize that list, first I would say experience. Folks don't know what they don't know right now. So there are a lot of things going on that people have to experience it and see, oh, yes, all right, okay, now I know what to do with this. Now I can collect this data. I can do these types of reports. I can do this type of automation. So experience is the big challenge because a lot of people they've never seen it before. But the designers are putting it in. After that, yes, best practices. Everyone needs to understand how you go about installing 10,000 network-based devices in any building. And this hospital will easily have that. That's before all of the computers. Forget PCs as any type of IoT device. This is everything else that's in that building.
Okay. Rich, jumping back to you, when it comes to a home, and we've been talking a lot about collecting data and having sensors and so forth. Is that something that's important to a homeowner? And is that what IoT means to them, or do you see the benefit being in the data side, or do you see it being something else?
Well, I mean, Richard and Mike bring up some interesting points. Just some numbers, just some rough numbers to bring up. Current estimates right now is that there is 6.4 billion connected devices right now. The conservative estimates by 2020 is that there will be anywhere from, and this is the conservative numbers, 21 billion devices by 2020. That's the conservative numbers. Anywhere up to 50 billion devices within the next 3.5 years at that point. It's a ridiculous amount of information that's potentially going to start being harvested. And so there's 2 points. And I said what was said before, which was data. Data is currency. We all know that. That's what all of the tech companies are banking on. That is why there's Google Home. That is why there's Alexa. There's all this information. It's data's power, and being able to harvest it and then being able to sell it is one thing. From the commercial side, from the facilities management side, those are savings. That's a way to be able to not only qualify but quantify how a building is running, how a building can be more efficient. And it gives people the ability to look at that information and be more effective and efficient with it. But you still have to aggregate that data. So on the commercial side, I see the power of it and being more fiscally responsible in a building and being more efficient. From the home side, it's a completely different animal right now. And really, I kind of see the comparison of really what happened when the tablet hit the market. 5-6 years ago, the consensus was, people would never use a connected device or BYOD in the boardroom. That'll never happen. And the next thing we knew, 5 years later, the huddle space movement occurred, right? The technology is moving at such a clip, and the perceived ease of use that people are starting to see in their home, they're just expected everywhere. We're not making that connection anymore. Those lines are much more blurred between the home and the workspace. And you can attribute that to just how people work, the nature of technology being much more pervasive in the way that people work. But there is a joining together of people are coming in and having expectations because they have the equivalent of a supercomputer in their pocket at this point. And really that's where I'm seeing the IoT thing is driving everything, is that, people will sit there and go, yeah, that's great. I can see a data graph of how, my house responded from thermostats over the course of the year. You can already do that. I can see my light efficiency. You can already do that. We've already had all of those tools available. What is happening is people are saying, wait, there's an opportunity for me to, without spending a significant amount of money, ways to fine-tune my home and personalize my home and harness that technology to streamline and simplify my life. I mean, for me, that's the Trojan horse. That's where the power of, and I was not a fan of Alexa in the beginning. I go on record as saying that I didn't think it was going to happen. But now seeing it in work and seeing how people are adjusting to it, and also, the marketing push for it. You've got the Amazon, you've got Google, Apple is trying with HomeKit, but who knows what they're going to be bringing out. Once they start gelling everything together. The grand umbrella is IoT, but the reality is that the message at this point is we're trying to make technology work for you. And I think in our community, what that means is kind of the equivalent of where we were 20 years ago, where we had 20 different devices, and they all worked different ways. Relay, IR, RS-232, you had VGA, you had DVI, you had all of these disparate subsystems. Now we're dealing in one playing field. which is we are dealing in the IT world. And so what we're dealing with now is, instead of the hardware side of things, and like Richard was saying, is that those things are out there. They're, again, everything is going to be able to talk. Now it's a matter of, okay, how do we harness that? And where our role becomes is taking all of that data that's important and sifting it to the people who need it. And so for me, that's where I see the residential push is coming from, is people are saying, yeah, I can say, hey, Alexa, do this, or Alexa, do that. The expectation of what a building can do, not only in the home, but in the workplace, is going to dramatically change within the next 12 to 24 months. And that's where I see that push, because of the consumer. And again, like I said, they've got the device already in their pocket.
So let me clarify something real quick. When I talked about it's about data collection, it's not about collecting data just for the data's sake. It's about collecting data to create an opportunity to predict what's going to happen or what needs to happen, and then affect that change. So I think the trend is, yes, Alexa and those kinds of things are the current flash in the pan. But what people really want is they want the system to just work for them. They don't want to have to ask it to do something. They want to be driving home and know that there's a geofence around their house that says, when I get within 10 minutes of my house, start cooking my dinner. Turn the lights on, turn the music on, so when I get home. So that's what the data is about. The data is about understanding the people, spaces, and things that are going on, and how can you take that data and create some actionable, predictive control from that.
Michael is absolutely right. With all the factors that are out there in my industry, in the commercial world, data is driving IoT. That's what people want. They want all of the data that they're going to get from all of these devices out there.
So let me ask a question. How do we fit in?
It's very interesting.
Overlapping, in my opinion. Michael, go ahead there.
No, I was going to say, in the residential space, I think there's huge challenges ahead for the AV industry, and not from the fact that there's lots of this and we got to figure out how to do it. It's becoming easier and easier to do, and it's becoming more and more automated with HomeKit, with Wink, with whatever the latest version is of how do we implement these systems, and how do we, I don't know how many of you guys have looked at If This Then That, right? Mm-hmm. The concept of being able to program your automation system for your house without a programmer, without a control system. What does that mean for this industry?
So I'll jump in, and I think that this is very interesting and a very interesting topic, and it almost kind of bridges the gap between the whole DIY movement that's happening a lot on the residential side and the commercial side of, this is important stuff because we need to know what's going on in our systems, and we need to be able to start to provide that same type of an experience that you grow used to at home, in the boardroom or in your business life. One of the things I'll kind of lead into is that we had I was fortunate to attend, and Mike was the MC, and Richard was a presenter at Infocom Insights in New York, and there was one earlier at I believe at the Infocom, as part of the Infocom show, or
we also did one in California. Yeah.
Oh, in California, I'm sorry. It was a great presentation and a great day of learning, and actually didn't know what to expect when I attended, and I found, and Mike, I'll kind of kick this to you. A few things that were interesting. One was your statement about the fact that we've been doing this since the 90s, where we've had connected devices, and but the second is that a lot of people just had their jaws open and didn't know what to make of some of this stuff, and I think that we as an industry need to figure out, how do we bridge that gap? How do we know that this is coming, and we know that this is out there? And I read this as a demand on programming, which I think is, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but how do we turn this into an opportunity, or how do we keep others from taking this opportunity away from us?
Yeah, so I think the opportunity is big enough for everybody. I didn't mean to imply that the AV industry is doomed, but I think there's going to be a lot more encroachment with the DIY or security integrators and people like that who are already in the home and already doing things and just expanding. You look at Comcast and Verizon, Fios, they're offering home control services and home monitoring services now. So it's a much larger environment. It's a much larger market, which is great. I think the challenge for AV, for the integrators in the AV realm, is think in terms of these other systems are not competitors. These are partners. So let's expand our vision and say, historically, a lot of AV integrators didn't want to touch HVAC, didn't want to touch lighting control. They didn't want to touch HVAC control. They didn't want to touch these other systems because they didn't understand them, right? And they were standalone systems that really didn't, okay, you put a monitor on it, you put a thermostat, and you control the thermostat. But think more in terms of, and this is really more in the commercial space, but it's about looking at these adjacent technologies and understanding how they can affect and how we can affect them. And so integrating with the security system as part of an overall vision of how the system operates, commercial space where you've got an ID badge, that ID badge now identifies you. And that can affect control and automation, but only if the systems are connected. So IoT is really more about just connecting everything and making sure that everything is connected than it is necessarily about the network and what's going on with the network. It's just making sure that everything is connected and connectable, so that data is available, so I can collect that data and then do something with it. Make intelligent decisions and choices about it. So from an AV perspective, make sure you learn about those adjacent technologies. Make sure you learn about BMS systems and security systems and all the other operational systems within a building, so that your systems can be compatible and can be integrated with those.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's very good advice. One thing that comes to mind for me is that when we're dealing with smaller systems, we have such a difficult time trying to really define a scope of work and define how things are supposed to interact. This is on a much more complex scale in my mind. How are we going to put that into words in terms of creating a solution, selling a system or a product or whatever that might be, or even giving it to a programmer to develop for you?
That's a huge challenge, because literally you can do anything. So what do you want to do? And how far do you go with it is one of the challenges. But the first step, and I think there's a much longer term than a 1 year of confusion. I think the confusion is going to continue for an extended period until we come to standards. Until we come to standards of how things talk, how do we normalize the data? If you've got a water temperature sensor and an air temperature sensor that one reports on Celsius and the other reports on Fahrenheit, and all you get is a number off of that, how do you know that, right? How do you manage that from a data perspective? So how can I even begin to define how the systems operate until I define that? So from our perspective as a consultant, we're starting to build, in the commercial world, there is a Division 25 specification format for CSI that defines integrated automation. And so the first step is making sure that all those other trades that I was mentioning understand that too. So AV is one of the systems in the building. Security, lighting, HVAC, all those are other systems. And somebody has to define, number one, what data needs to be collected. And then number two, how that data needs to be represented. And then you can get to, what do I do with it? But if that data is collected appropriately and that data normalized, then it becomes a narrative of, okay, what do I want to happen if that data is already there and available and collected? Then I can just say, based on these conditions, do this. So it actually becomes much easier than what we've done traditionally, which is, okay, I have to figure out how this device works and how its data gets presented and how I collect it. How do I do that, right? And so, yes, there's a much bigger picture that needs to be looked at, and there's potentially more interactions. So the first step is looking at it not as a technical problem, but as a business problem. What are you trying to do? What is the goal? What are the business goals? What are the operational goals of this organization? And from there, you can define the things that need to be done. And from there, you define what data needs to be available to make those things actionable.
Makes sense. Richard, can you jump in on this and share your experiences in terms of how when you're working with someone, you're able to get them to really kind of put together a roadmap or even understand how to identify how to get to where they what they're looking to accomplish, or what's the approach you take?
Right. So a comment was made earlier about the numbers of devices out there, and it is huge. Probably what I should have followed that up with is that it's not overwhelming, and it's not overwhelming because you have the lighting guys, and now they're part of IoT, and the HVAC guys, they were early adopters, they're in on it, and they've got their part. And then security, access control, all of those guys. So everybody has their little group and component that they're bringing in. So in the big picture, it's growing every day, but it's not such that my customer, the hospital, for instance, it's not something that they say, well, we can't do this. We've got to stop. So when you look at how we're adopting this, and when I speak to my customers out there and I suggest this is what we need to look at, consider this and consider that. It is not a difficult sales job, and I'm more of a creator and an innovator than I am a salesperson. So I would say that if I can sell it, then you don't have to work much at it. But that being said, the customers have to understand what is it that's bringing this about, why. And it's an interesting thing that's happening right now because there is as much hype associated with it. And if something has hype, then everybody feels, well, I've got to be interested, right? If I don't, then I'm not in on this. I'm missing something. So there is a factor of hype that is in with this. And that is driving the entire industry along. And I think that hype is probably installing 50% more equipment in some locations, sensor devices, than we really need. Now, in 10 years, I think that, yes, if you install it, they will come. So when you look at everything that's being installed today, there are some challenges there. There's a lot more data than we know what to do with. There's a lot more devices. Each passing day, though, all of that is coming together. Each new innovation, each new version of software from the manufacturers that are taking more components in, each component that is sharing more information and looking for more information. And then on top of that, you have your data consumers that are also IoT devices out there. And a great example of that is HoloLens. That's the Microsoft semi-emerged headset device. That's going to change the AV world significantly, because when you walk into a room and you don't need displays on the wall, the display is built into your headset. that potentially takes away a lot of opportunities for AV guys, but I don't think the business goes away. I think that now you're going to shift more into one, streaming. You've got to understand video better than you ever did before, and audio, but you also have to be better at installing devices that will connect to all the components out there. And that way, when you have a data consumer like HoloLens, you can give the best possible experience. Did that answer your question?
Sure. I think that the answer, and both you and Mike and Rich have said, it's not, it really isn't fully defined, but what we need to do is we need to be able to have the connectivity in place to be able to provide the solutions, and we have to focus on providing something that a user needs rather than just providing functionality for the sake of providing functionality. That's what I'm making of it.
And that really that goes back to how we've always done AV systems. We often put in features and capabilities and technologies and control systems and control functions that the user really didn't need. We need to take a different approach towards this than we have traditionally taken, and that is really sit down and understand the needs and expectations of the users and work backwards from there, as opposed to let's design an AV system that has all these features and all these capabilities and thousands of buttons on the touch panel, and then the user ends up using one button. I literally had a CEO tell me one time, he goes, all I want is one button. I just want it to do what I want it to do when I want it to do it. And that's what the customers are looking for. They don't want the reason Alexa and things like that have perceived value to people is I can tell it exactly what I want. I don't have to predefine what it does. I can tell it what I want. And if we can think in terms of putting ourselves in the place of the user and really understanding what are they really truly trying to achieve? Because when I walk into a conference room or boardroom, I don't want to plug in my laptop and show my presentation on the screen. What I want to do is communicate. What is the fastest way for me to be able to communicate my message to the people I'm meeting with? It's a whole different discussion when you talk about it from that perspective than how do I plug in my laptop? How do I connect it up? How do I put it on the screen? How do I make the call? I just want to communicate. How do I communicate?
I think that's a great way to wrap up, and I appreciate that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that I was smiling or chuckling to myself when you were saying a lot of the things that you said in terms of having all the buttons on the screen, because that's something that I feel we spend a lot of time creating a lot of functionality that a lot of people don't use.
Yep.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for today, but this has been a great discussion and a great topic, and probably something that we'll come back to again in the future. I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you for being part of this. First, Mike Carter from the Clarion Group, thank you for joining us. And how can people reach you or learn more about the Clarion Group?
Just our website's a little challenging. It's theclariantgroup.com, but that's the best way to see what we're all about. Email for me is just mcarter@theclariantgroup.com. So please reach out and let me know if you need anything.
Great, thank you. Next, Richard Blackwell, thanks for joining us again. Richard from Link2 Software. How can people reach you or your company?
Thanks, Steve. It was an awesome time as always. Always LinkedIn's a great opportunity to reach out. And I have similar challenges to Michael, and richard.blackwell@link2software.com tells you how difficult it is to get a decent URL these days.
Yeah, that web thing, it finally hit, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And last but not least, Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa, thanks for joining us as always. How can people reach you and learn more about Fregosa Designs?
Fortunately, I did not have that problem with my company name or the website, the fregosadesign.com. But best way is Twitter at rfregosa. Type in my name in the interwebs, and you can see me on AVNation. We're doing Resi Week tomorrow. I've got appearances on CE Pro and Electronic House. But for the most part, just type in my name, something pops up. And as always, if anybody has questions or just more information, that's why we're here. And obviously follow us on avnation.tv.
Great. Thank you. And as Rich said, check out avnation.tv for many different podcasts, many different forms of content. The one that I would recommend if you do like this topic is the Connected Show with David Danto. They talk a lot about the whole idea of network connected devices. But in summary, I think that this is a good topic for us to continue to discuss, and please reach out to us if you have any feedback or anything you want to hear more about on avnation.tv. So my name is Steve Greenblatt. I've been your host today. You can reach me on most social media platforms at Steve Greenblatt, and reach my company at controlconcepts.net. But thank you for joining us today. That's all we have time today for on A State of Control.